Hello, everybody, and welcome to Side Hustle to Freedom. Today, I am very excited to have with me Cindy Hively. Welcome, Cindy.
Hello, Ben. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm just excited about this topic and what it really means when you say, welcome to the hustle.
Yes, we are going to deconstruct the hustle, and we may even get rid of the hustle through this conversation. But before we dive into that, Cindy, can you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world today?
I would love to. Well, my name is Cindy Hively. I live in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, and I am an intuitive healing coach. I help those who uh, have blockages, have any kind of barriers in their way, whether and it's in any line of body, mind, spirit, physical, whatever it might be. I help them to bust through that, hustle through that, really, with coaching, and live the life that they're meant to live, the purpose that they are put on this earth to live, because that is why we're here.
All right. Amen. Amen. So you weren't always doing this. So tell us about your superhero origin story, about how you got to this cool place that you're at, and how you can identify with lots of folks who kind of feel stuck in a career.
Well, I'm probably the opposite of being stuck in a career. I didn't realize it, though, at the time, because I loved what I did. I loved my job. I was in corporate America retail. I was traveling all the time, working all these great hours, lots of hours, putting my name up on the top of the charts, moving up the corporate ladder. And, my goal was to really be in those top positions. And long story short, I did this since I was in college. Actually, I was in this kind of setting and moved up. And I was, in a South Carolina, I'm in Virginia, so it's about 5 hours away. And my body basically had been giving me some signals. And at this particular time, my entire body gave me a huge signal, and it completely went numb. And luckily, I had pulled off to the side of the road before that actually all happened. And then when I came back into my body, and I immediately went home and put my finger on a doctor that I knew I needed to see, rheumatology, and was diagnosed with several chronic illnesses. And what turned out to be 4 weeks of being out of work turned out to be an eternity. So during that time, having this job and being successful, loving what I did, I lost my identity,
Right.
because somewhere along the line through all of this, the hustle and the goal setting and all the things that I thought I truly loved, I realized it took about a year being in bed, actually, and a divine intervention is what I call it, of waking me up on a snowy afternoon. I've always loved snow as a child. I love snow. And I walked out into the snow. It was about 3 inches. I'll never forget it, because I just had my robe on and my slippers. And I just stopped in my tracks. And for the first time, and I don't know how long in my life, I saw things that I had not remembered or noticed in so long. And it was like, at that moment, it was like, oh my gosh, okay, the divine has something here. I kind of had that feeling, and it hit me that hard. And I just surrendered. I said, you know what? Divine God, whatever you have for me to do, I need you to show me the way. I don't know what it is. I have no idea, but I know I can't keep living the life I'm living. And it was kind of at that moment where I realized, my passion had always been helping others to achieve, coaching. Those had always been teaching. Those had always been my passion. And somehow, through the right coaches and everything for me in my life, I turned what my passion was into a business, of helping others, on their journeys through, whether it is a job that they dislike, or it's creating a new job, or it is whatever that they need to get over to move forward. So that is kind of my Shiro story of how things really began.
All right. All right. Did I hear that right, Shiro?
Shiro story.
All right. Cool. I like it. Um, just out of curiosity, what were all those illnesses that you had out of curiosity, just so, people can identify with any of those?
Well, I'm probably a little read down. I don't know. But I was diagnosed with lupus, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, some heart issues, you know, and it's not like they magically have disappeared either. I want others to know that too, that it's in these, it's not like I'm miraculously healed now and all of a sudden I'm doing this work in the world. I've looked at my life differently, and really through lifestyle change and through getting in touch with my, really inner core of my truth is what changed my life. And it's so strange to me because I thought I was happy before,
Right.
but I've never been more happy in my life than I am right now, despite the illnesses and everything else that comes from day to day.
So how do we get that? And I've asked other people this question: do we need something intense like that to help us realize what's really important, or is there a way for us to understand that without having to go through that type of fire? And maybe you don't know the answer, but I think it's an interesting one to ask.
Well, I think that every one of us, we all are unique, and we all go through the things we go through. And some people may disagree with me on this, but I truly believe the traumas, the experiences, the whatever, the muck, the good stuff, all of it, that we've gone through it for a reason. And from that we get to create and we get to choose. And not everybody has a really, a story where they've been knocked down, like my story. Not everybody does, but it comes through even the slightest little changes, and this is where choice is so huge in our life. It's that awareness. Awareness is so important. When you feel something isn't quite right, that is your inner compass waking you up to guide you to a different direction. And it comes to us from divine intervention. It comes to us from, I really truly believe that this world we live in has our back, and what we completely resist or we're not persistent at knowing, then it's going to continue to show up. So having awareness, I think, is key. Feeling just that kind of feeling that something's not quite right, just spending time with yourself, taking that sacred pause and really seeing what's underneath that and why you're feeling that way, and being able to ask yourself those tough questions, and at the same time be able to accept the answer. So I think it's an awareness and an acceptance.
Yes. And I know for me, the story that comes to mind was when I accepted a cool new job in a PR company that looked great on paper, finally put me in the six figures land. This was, over 10 years ago. And, it didn't feel right. I had that intuition that, oh, this looks good on paper, but, and at the time I wasn't ready to heed intuition's call. And I also continued to, just kind of numb myself in general with alcohol, because it was easier to self-medicate and ignore rather than feel and see where that led me. But I think to your point, listening to that and walking towards it rather than away from it will only serve us.
Absolutely, because vulnerability is such a huge key to our life. And so many times when we think about our being vulnerable, we think about it being really weakness, or we think about it just not being okay, because understanding vulnerability, and I love Brene Brown and how she kind of connects all these things together, but it's that act of sitting with yourself in that awareness, and then that acceptance, like you were just talking about, instead of numbing out, really accepting what is coming up, and being able to hold yourself in that space without judgment, without any kind of critiquing, and realizing that that's there to serve a purpose for you. And if you want to change your life, this is actually a practice that you can do with every part of your life. It's not just with what we're talking about here, but it is a life changer to be able to be in vulnerability with yourself and to others.
Yes, yes. And I think, two things come up for me when you say that. One is, I think for us that have been coached for a while, that sounds very natural, and not necessarily easy, but we get it. I think when for the uninitiated into people that have done a lot of work into themselves, that can seem a little bit esoteric. And how do I do that? So I often recommend getting in touch with a trained professional for something like that, when you want to have a mirror that's going to be impartial and holding you to your highest self. So that's one thing that comes up for me. And the second is that through that awareness, we also become aware of our stories. So for me, understanding that my idea of success was a story, and my ideas around who I was and what I was capable of, for example, I'm not the entrepreneurial type, was a story I had, and becoming aware of what are these theories that we have about the world we live in that seem true to us, but are actually just this artificial cage that we keep ourselves in.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. When you said that, I went ding, 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 ding. You know what? We tell ourselves, and there's a reason for this. When we're in those places and the stories start coming up, there's a reason why we do that. It's because physiologically, our brain needs to connect to something that's uncomfortable, so it tells a narrative, it tells a story. And the story usually is not true, because we don't then seek the answers to really find out the truth. And I know for me, when I was going through even when I was going through this transition in my life from being the successful corporate American, person, to even starting out on my own path, because of the differences of what I learned about myself that I never really did for so many years, I had a story going on constantly. What is my parents going to think? They're Baptist, and they don't buy into the goddess part of my life that I live. So what are my parents going to think? And I had all these stories going on that kind of kept me from moving forward, and my dad has always been so proud of me. He's not going to be proud of me now because I'm have this illness. I mean, it was traumatizing to a point where it kept me completely stuck until I was able to break through those things. And so when we start telling ourselves these stories that you're talking about, then it's time to sit down and have that conversation with yourself. Okay, is this story something I truly believe? Why am I believing it? And where's it coming from? Who did it come from? And why did it get here? Because most of the time when we start asking, we find out that they're fairy tales, or they're not true at all. So anyway, that's another part of getting to where you want to be, is really talking to yourself about the stories that are going on, tell ourselves.
Yes. So tying that back to the side hustle to freedom in order to step into the vision of where you want to go, choosing something that you want to explore to step into your next phase, and write your new story. You need to also understand what narratives may or may not be there that could sabotage you along the way, so that you can like dodge them instead of like letting them just hold you back. So that's kind of why this is so important.
Yeah.
How did you go from the divine intervention, snowy day, into practicing helping to heal others? I'm sure it was a process. What did that look like, and how did you gain those skills, and what did that process look like?
Well, it is a process. And at first, I started with myself. I started really doing a lot of work for myself. And that meant that I had to get off my butt and find out the answers to things that I was numbing out on and didn't want to know. And within that, I found a great health coach. I worked with Kim Duramo, who's a great, wonderful, renowned health coach, Dr. Kim Duramo. And all these, it was so strange because through all this process of working on myself and seeing what did work, and it was like, oh my gosh, it just came from within. Things were put in my path. It was like I couldn't get out of the way, because if I tried to, and yeah, I felt a little fear. And I will say something about fear. Fear is put into our life for two reasons. One is to keep us from danger, as we know. And well, really three reasons. And the fears that we have that surround our life every day are connected to usually something physical, the psychological part of our mind, and physiologically. And the third is when we are on a path, if we don't feel fear in some way or another, then it's not meant to be. If you're comfortable, then that's not quite the good, it's nice to be comfortable, but it's also meaning that you're growing. So saying that, so the right people, and I just really listened to the longing really of my heart and my intuition. And what came up for me was, I have learned so much about my body, things I never knew at all about the body. I've learned so much about my being, and things that the way I've learned how to make things joyful in my life, and what that took to realize that it's okay to put myself first above other people. It's okay to say no to certain things. It's okay for me to live as the woman that I'm meant to be, and not by anybody else's rules or regulations or boundaries and all that. And I just, at this time in my life, it was so many women were starting to, on my like Facebook page or my social media, I would post things, and so many women were gravitating towards that. And they were like asking me questions. And I was like, oh, okay, this is uncomfortable. I think this means something. And it did. And that's kind of like the process over a couple of years that led me into what I do now. And not only going in that direction, that path, but truly owning it and saying, I am intuitive. I can help somebody break through something in 5 minutes. I do have these gifts, and I honor these. And to me, that has been my process, and it continually grows, continually grows. I have clients that have come for me for transformation because of a difficulty in their life and relationships, who are with me now because they're growing a business. So it's like when you start working on that one thing in your life that's just not right, starts opening up all these little doors, and it continually goes on. But you got to always listen to that inner core that's authentically you. You have to honor that, and you have to allow yourself to be okay in that sovereignty of who you are, because then everything's right.
Yes, then you can have alignment. I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
definitely. Yeah.
How do you help people get more in tune with that radio station? How do we turn up the volume? How do we get it full blaring so it's so loud it can't be ignored?
Well, it's part of this has to do with, I'll have to say, my listening abilities have really changed for the better in the last few years, and also feeling into another person. So recently, I'll give you recent, and I was actually at a doctor's office. This is crazy. Um, I'm having some issues with my heart. I actually have it on right now. It's a heart monitor, and I was actually talking with the nurse or who was putting this, and she was just having this bad day, I could tell. And I'm like, and I just opened up to her, and I'm like, how's your day going? And she's like, I'm just having some difficulties at home, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't, I'm here. If I can. So she's just I'm open to wherever I am, to anything. And she started sharing what was going on in her personal life with a tragedy that happened in her family, and how one of her sons was reacting. And I immediately knew exactly what that was with her, and I started asking her questions. And from those questions, she's now a client, So it's like, forgot the question.
We were talking about how to tune into intuition. So I think essentially you're saying you're always on right now, but being curious and going through with that curiosity.
Exactly. It's like wherever I am, and again, this is a process, and it's a learned skill too. I feel like, and of course I have my sacred silent time, but when I'm out or when I'm with clients, I really listen. I'm open, and not just my ears, but I allow all of my senses to work through everybody that I work with, because your eyes pick up on things, your ears hear things, even through touch. If you can, I can tell sometimes if my mom or dad is going through something just by the way that I feel them touch, hug me, or something like that. So I use those opportunities to not necessarily gain clients. That's not why, but to be open enough to give back, because honestly, that's my morning prayer when I get up. Before I even get out of bed, the first thing that I do is, I ask God to lead me to the people that I'm supposed to be led to, and to bring those people to me, and I will serve them. And so it's kind of like a contract I make before I even get out of bed. And it's just so important to me. Just so
Yeah.
important.
And I want to highlight that because I think it's a great way when we're framing from a job that we may not be totally excited about, um, centering it around not how can I get out of this, but how can I serve people in a meaningful way. And even if the mechanism or the how is not clear, setting that intention of, I really want to serve people in a bigger way. And what does that look like? And start, being open to that. We can start being open to possibility. And then I know, for example, when I started doing that, I first had a story that you can't serve others meaningfully and make good money. And that was like another story that was like programmed into me from childhood somehow, that I had to work past as I was in tune
Mhm.
with wanting to help others more.
Yeah. And that's a big thing right now, and any kind of online businesses, coaching businesses, it's it it's the money game. And let me tell you, I personally am not here to make $1 million with my business. I know that my body, my limitation, I know that that's not what it is.
Right.
For me, of course, the exchange of money is very important to allow me to continue what I do, and to, you know, create what I want in my life in other ways too, outside of my business. But it's it's the other things that are important too. The currency is just not cash or coins. Currency is how you feel. Currency is bringing in joy to your life. Currency is spending time with your kids. I'm a grandmother now, and of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and oh my goodness, I just spent 5 weeks with them, and I allowed myself to scale back from my business and working during those 5 weeks. I just did it. I thought I had the story. Oh, you shouldn't do that. People are going to think that you're dropping the ball and all this kind of stuff. And I finally said, it doesn't feel right that I don't. I'm going to spend this time with my family. And I had the most amazing time with them. And guess what? Everything carried on, you know? So it's, again, really looking at, there's so much more than just the financial aspects to it. It's all the other aspects, and what it can bring to your life.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story that when I was training to become a coach, and I was at the end of my coach training, I was like, if I'm going to become a life coach, I have to live out a dream. And I credit coaching to giving me the tools to do it. And I traveled around the world for 8 months with a backpack. And I had a lot of stories, and it was great. I started with Kilimanjaro, and I ended
Mhm.
with Everest Base Camp, and it was absolutely epic. And I had that story beforehand that, if I leave this job, I'm not going to be able to get another one when I get back. And it was actually just the opposite, that when I got back, people were fascinated in interviews like, wow, you just did that. I've always wanted to do that. And I was energetically more aligned, and people responded to that. So, there's so much value in, like you're saying, with both of these stories, aligning with where you want to be rather than what you think you should do.
Yes, yes, yes. And yes, absolutely. Because, if we're not in alignment ourselves first, if we're not waking up every morning with this feeling of, you know, a purpose, it's so important in our lives, because we're more, knowing ourselves and having this purpose. We're more than just who we think we are. It allows us to branch out and enjoy so much, and even the things we don't like to do. I know might sound a little off the beaten path here, but um, we do have to do things every day, right, that we don't like to do. It's part of the description. um, you know, and trust me, one of my favorite things is not doing dishes. But I thought, man, how can I make this more enjoyable? And I probably lit 10 candles. I turned off my kitchen light one night. I did this a few years ago. And I do this from time to time now just because I fell in love with it. Put on the candles, had enough light there, and put my water in my dish detergent or whatever. Make my own dish detergent. So I love doing that. And I just started feeling the textures on the plate, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is yummy. And then my mind started going into, I'm so grateful that I actually made what I made tonight. My husband liked it. It was really good, and then where did the food even come from, and who grew it? I mean, I just went down this entire path because I, put something into, um, even the times when we're not really thrilled about something, we can bring something into it by just doing a choice change, and figuring out a way, okay, how can I make this more enjoyable? and have this story. And so I know a couple of people have tried that and they're like, oh my gosh, it makes such a huge difference. So it's those tiny little things that we do in life that can change so much. We realize that we're so much more than we think we are.
Totally, totally. And to that end, if there's stuff even sitting at a desk that we don't want to do, getting up and shaking it out or dancing to a song can just help us shift our energy and just enjoy that thing a little bit more because we're not in that same kind of stagnant
Yeah.
energy space.
Oh yeah, moving energy. Love to do that too. Absolutely.
Um, what else have we not covered today that we think is super important for people that are like, okay, this is great. You're healing, you're feeling energy, but I got to put food on the table and I got bills to pay. I don't have time for this stuff. What else have we not covered that we think would help people shift into putting themselves first and realizing the power of that?
Yeah, that's a great question because I have learned and have seen we have the time. There's so many things on our plate that are not necessary and we don't even know why we do them. First of all, um, you know, it's I've always baked my daughter her cake for her birthday. You know what? I went to visit. I didn't feel like baking. I went to the I went to the store, got a cake and brought it in. It was still just as good. So there's so many things that we do in our life that are really unnecessary. So I think it's part of really sitting down with yourself. If you're truly looking to make some changes of freeing up some time and knowing what's important, the awareness, sitting down with yourself, writing things down that you do every day, that's maybe a habit, and start crossing some of those things off the list, because you'll find out that there's more things you cross out than you have, you know. And some of these other things just take minutes to incorporate into your life. Just, even at a stoplight, you can ask yourself some questions. Just finding the time during those times when may think that "Ugh, I'm at this stoplight, what am I going to do?" Ask yourself a question, just like, you know, what is my goal? Truly, what is my goal today? What do I want to get out of my day today? What is so important to me? And I just think it's spending more time with ourselves, and something that we think we don't have a lot of time for, and it's so necessary, so we do have more time for all the other things in our life. And I know this is all about the hustle, and to me, I have times where I have the hustle going on, but I also know that there's times in my life where I have to step back. I have to honor what's going on with my body or in my life or family dynamics. And when I do that, then I'm able to get back up and the hustle starts again, and it's in a flow. So your hustle may not be 100 miles per hour. Your hustle may be 25 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour, but it's your hustle. So owning what is yours and not somebody else's, not thinking that something has to be something different than what it truly is, except for yourself.
Yes, yes. And I think another way to say that comes to mind is that oftentimes we live default by other folks' vision. And if we really ask ourselves, what is our vision for ourselves, we get to step into that. And if we ask, what am I doing with my time? Am I doing what's most impactful towards my vision, or am I doing busy work that keeps me safe and not stretching? I know, for example, in a corporate job, doing emails was like a nice way of playing it safe rather than working on those impactful things that carried some risk but carried more growth with them as well. So, circling back to what you were saying, is that that fear, as we're on the path towards something that we're excited about, that fear, that flip side is excitement. So if it's not going to kill us and our intuition is drawing us, then interpreting that as excitement can serve us and carry us further.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome.
But
Do you have a free gift for our audience today, Cindy?
I do. And I'm sure it's posted below. And
Yes.
just click on that, and it's I think it's 5 weeks of rituals, and it's just something. Rituals are so important in our everyday life, and to me, it kind of is honoring who I am. And when people hear the word ritual, they think of, something at church or something that's a holiday or something, that goes on. Ritual is nothing more than repetition. That's all. Brushing your teeth every day is a ritual.
Uh-huh.
So this will help you kind of lean into the rituals that you might be needing in your life, and letting go of some of the things that you don't need.
Awesome. I mean, I have to ask, what are your favorites?
Oh, what are my favorite rituals? Woo! Well, the first thing after, I do my stretching and do my spiritual practice in the morning is I take my boys outside, even if it's raining. I have a big old umbrella, and I take, especially my one boy, my one big boy. He's actually 276 pounds. He's an English Mastiff. We walk the entire. I live in the woods, and we will walk around the woods, and that's my favorite ritual. That really gets me going in the morning. And then throughout the day, I have to set aside some time to Skype with my grandkids and daughter. And then, I would say there's a lot of other things I do too. Just taking 5 seconds out here just to notice something different, just simple things. And then at night, I close my day out. I go back outside, and I just am so grateful for the things that have come into my life for the day. I let everything go, fall off my shoulders, onto the ground, and allow, even if it's something I need to pick up again, I just allow, Mother Earth and the divine to hold it for me so I can be clear and go lay my head down on a pillow
All right. That's
and
beautiful.
sleep.
All right. All right. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up here. Cindy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your energy with me and the audience. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ben. It's
All
been
right.
fun.
Indeed.